through the negotiations with Rocky Mountain Power on consolidating. Keep in mind, there were two utilities that were going to build two different transmission lines through this valley. We got together and hammered out a deal to a point where there would only be one transmission line built. It's dual circuit, 46 kV on one side, that is Heber Light Power, 138 kV on the other side, that is Rocky Mountain Power's. Rocky Mountain Power is the transmission company for the state of Utah. They operate many 138 kV lines. We felt that it was in our best interest from a pure operational perspective and maintenance perspective on this line that it would be better in our ratepayers' overall cost analysis on this whole project, that it would be better for our ratepayers, for Rocky Mountain Power, to obtain ownership of this line once it got completed. We would still own the 46 kV, and we have a joint use agreement with Rocky Mountain Power to where we are always accessible to our portion of that line. But yeah, they will own and operate that line once it's completed.
So if a pole needs replacing, who pays for it?
Rocky Mountain Power will pay to replace that line. We might have to pay some additional costs if our facilities are damaged during that process.
Is there any downside to giving them control of those easements as been suggested?
No, they are very much set up to operate a line of this magnitude.
And maybe to your question, Josh.
The mic.
It's been, oh, sorry, Adam Long, General Counsel for Heber Light Power.
He's our reporter.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's okay, we're good.
Sorry, I followed the finger to the wrong desk. It's been correctly noted that Heber Light Power has agreed to give up some, arguably somewhat undetermined prescriptive easement rights that we have. From our perspective, we're not in the business of acquiring property or owning easements for the sake of owning property or easements. We're in the business of providing power. That existing line, that existing prescriptive easement allows Heber Light Power to provide power to the valley. Ownership of the three conductors, our 46 kV line on the structures owned by Rocky Mountain Power, provides us with that same right or even an increased right. So our goal is not to acquire property, our goal is to successfully and affordably and reliably provide power. And the arrangement does just that.
I would just like to comment that I don't think it's the place of the County Planning Commission to analyze the agreement between Heber Light and Power and Rocky Mountain Power. I think it's great. I support, I've lived all over the world. Great thing about America is citizens can get copies of the contract, get involved, they can get passionate, and we have places to voice all this. But it's not our place to, in my opinion, to second guess an agreement that is entered into by a body representing county and city, all the impacted jurisdictions have a board for Heber Light and Power. And they have the right to, it's their duty and responsibility to enter into a good faith agreement. I don't think we can rethink that. I don't think it's our place in the context of a conditional use permit to start getting into that element of it.
I tend to agree. There was just some concern raised about negative impact.
And it's good that we're thinking about this stuff, but that's not us. That's not this place. It's not what we're doing. So.
Well, let me ask a quick question about the height of the trees that was raised earlier. I mean, I'm assuming what you're going to be planting are not full-grown trees, but can you talk a little bit about what the height is expected to be, if you know?
Yeah, I believe it would comply with the standard. There's a standard for caliper size and height. Is it 2 inches and 6 feet for deciduous would be the initial height. And the only thing that I would throw out in addition to that to consider is the transmission lines come down off of 650 and go into the substation and come back out to the alignment. obviously we're going to be limited in the mature height of those trees. We don't want it growing up into the line. Although there are various species that you can plant kind of in those areas. So,
But you'd have no objection, as was suggested from public comment, of adding species or varieties at least 30 or 40 feet tall.
I don't have to, as long as it doesn't impede the safe operation of the facility.
Right.
Is it possible to bury the poles in the substation itself? I'm assuming not, but I don't know.
I'm unaware of that.
That was just some suggestion.
That was, let me clarify, that was the lines, because you've got two different issues here. You have the substation issue, which is the 35, and then they say they're going to exceed for, as I understood, 2 poles that are going to be in the substation. So, and the county's saying you can be over 49 feet for the poles under their conditional use. The substation can't be over 35 feet. So what is the height that the commission's going to set on that 49-foot pole? If it's something too high, well, why can't we bury the line, not the pole? Because maybe you
I
confuse
think the
line.
point is,
Yeah.
you've got lines up here. At some point, those lines have to be kept at a safe distance above the ground until they get to the substation. So what they're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is you need another pole there that's just like the other poles, and then you drop down. So I think it's going to go from whatever the safe height is, everybody correct me if I'm wrong, and then it drops straight into the substation. So there's no sort of bearing, it's not really the point.
Yeah, within the substation, you still have to maintain any SC clearances. Because it's a controlled space, within that substation fence, it's a controlled space, the clearances are slightly different. So the profile is lower, I mean, it's still above ground.
So how high is the pole in the substation?
Which pole?
In the substation.
You said there's 2
We're
poles
just
in
trying
the
to get a
substation.
feel for what this substation looks like inside.
Yeah, so the large structures inside the substation will be approximately within 10 feet likely total height of the transmission line poles. So if you're looking at 75 feet, maybe 65 feet, 60, 65 feet tall. And then from there, they'll come down into, and you can't see it here, the bus work, where the power flows, it kind of crisscrosses each other. So there's a high bus and a low bus, and you'll be 30 feet or so on the high bus, and the facilities are kind of all below that.
Is there any conceivable way to reduce the height of those 2 dead end poles within the substation?
You have to make the transition from the transmission line to the substation. There. Any conceivable is pretty broad.
Reasonable way.
You know, Nicole's saying no, I'm gonna say no.
She's pretty smart.
Yeah, that's correct. They're already as short as they possibly can be inside that substation.
So is it 70 feet then is the maximum, is what I'm hearing?
So maximum height of those dead-end structures would be about 65 feet.
65.
And that's to the static, that's to the shield wire that goes to the top. The actual transmission lines are down at 45 feet above ground.
Did you catch all of that, or are there questions on it? The static is for lightning protection.
Yeah, I think we got it. Thank you. I don't think I have any other questions. Anything else?
Well, it's time to make a motion. Although we have a 1 a.m.
We're gonna have a discussion.
No, we just did.
Yeah, I think we should have a discussion. So there's a couple of things to discuss, I think. First of all, format-wise, I think there needs to be 2 different motions, because I think the factors are, for the conditional use, are totally different as to the mitigating factors in the substation and the poles. It seemed to me a little bit cleaner to do it that way rather than trying to jumble them together. I don't want to make it more complicated, but I think that's, so the record is clear, that's the appropriate way to do it.
And it's been noticed as 2 separate items.
Doesn't have.
One A and one B.
Just in your report, just so that it was clear that you had, this was the previous report you got, so all that information is still there, and then the new one.
All right.
For example, I think the mitigating factors on the substation have very little to do with the pole. It's totally different. Maybe we can jumble them all together. You're smarter than I am, but that would seem to me to be a little bit easier.
So is everybody comfortable with the process we followed so far?
You're talking about the notice, the procedure?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that
Again,
we're.
we have driven all over the valley, we've been several times.
That's not what we're talking about.
Well, the driving is much the issue that I think some people are vocal about and some people are less vocal but concerned about, which is, first of all, have all the options been considered? And has the public been given a fair chance to comment on them? I'm comfortable, as painful as this whole thing is, I'm comfortable that the public has been given many, many opportunities to learn about this project, to weigh in and provide real evidence, not just, this is bad, I don't want power lines. Nobody wants these power lines in their backyard. I'm very sympathetic to you, very. But, you know, the multiple opportunities since this kind of came to light, and I've been here since December 2017, since that first hearing, there's a lot of opportunities for the public to get involved. And they have been involved to a certain extent. There's a passionate group that pays attention. It's just like democracy works everywhere. There are people who have the time and bandwidth and energy and passion to get involved. And there's a huge part of our valley who will, when this is said and done, I don't know, a year, 18 months from now, go, oh my gosh, how did that ever happen? But they will have not spent 1 calorie getting involved and weighing in or bringing alternative studies on health or whatever it is. So I feel comfortable that the process has had lots of opportunities for people to weigh in. And I think staff has put time in. I think, you know, the applicants have put time and effort. They've been responsive. They've been confronted by multiple bodies from their own board to other jurisdictions in addition to this jurisdiction. So I'm comfortable that it's happened. That people, if they don't show up, they don't show up. You know, if they don't hire somebody to do an alternative study, they don't say, hey, we looked at this route going around this edge of the valley as opposed to right through the middle, which I don't like, but, you know. There is, by the way, you raised one thing about going to the road just to the west. Do you have a comment on, did you look at going on the existing line to the west?
It's probably cheaper because you don't have to, if you go up through the North Fields, you're gonna have to mat a lot of stuff and do a lot of extra work to get your equipment in there.
I know, we drove.
You know, and you can go right up that road.
I'm looking for, it's 1750 west.
Right.
Did you look at the existing, using 1750, the existing route on 1750 west as an alternative?
Yeah, early on, we looked at several different possibilities. We, you know, definitely brought in many different stakeholders. You know, the bypass route has been talked about a lot. You know, at the end of the day, we have been working with MAG, we've been working with UDOT. We know that we're just north of them. We know that we're just to the west of them. Whatever proposal they end up with. I mean, as Heber City is developing out through there, those options on that thing are dwindling. And, you know, option A is probably going to end up being the route because it's going to be the only route.
And that's along, but basically
so you
tried to stay close to the bypass.
Yes, and we were under a directive of a study that was done by a Wasatch County commissioner, and a Heber Light and Power board member was on that study back in the early 2000s for transmission siting for Wasatch and Summit counties. They tasked us with staying in transportation corridors or existing transmission corridors. And that is what we have gone into with this. That is what we tried to stay with this. And we have included the county, Heber City, Midway City, throughout this whole process, 12 years worth of meetings with stakeholders on this route.
Okay, so is it fair to say that you could have looked at 17, you maybe did look at 1750, but when you connect all the pieces together, the route you're proposing is the one that is most workable? That's the optimal route based on all this work?
Cost-wise, Jason? I mean, the big deal here is cost. And you got an existing pole line up there that goes to Loren's house.
We've got an existing pole line that's a distribution pole line, it's single phase, and it's not even comparable to what we're.
Right, I understand, but you're talking cost. You don't have to spend any money to go up the road.
Okay, well,
like I said, this has been vetted by multiple people. A lot of people aren't even around anymore that we've been vetting this thing. And this is the route. This is the route that was covered.
The only point I want to make is that for all this time, everybody, and this has come up, is everyone's going to say, well, did you think about this? Did you think about this? And this could go on for a decade.
But the only reason I bring it up is in the last meeting, you asked for alternatives. Okay? Yeah, you guys said, come in with an alternative. That was part of the discussion. You didn't let us speak.
I said it, I think I made that comment, and I meant it in the comment of, they've done the work to show what they believe is the best route, and if somebody else, meaning the public, or some other group from the public can show really a viable alternative route,
There is.
bring it in, but nobody has that.
Well, but
Nobody
can I offer this? We've asked on that questions that I proposed to you, asked to look at the alternatives. They have never been shown to us. It's always, we've looked at alternatives. But you can come, you're basically talking something that's very easy to cross.
I've seen personally 15 different alternatives left and right, and they all kind of end up getting into the same general concept. And that's just so I haven't been involved for 20 years or whatever, whenever this has happened. I guess my only point, and I know you're not going to be happy.
Your light's not on. Your light isn't on for all this, sorry.
My wife says I speak too loudly anyway, so it's probably my only point with all of this is, and I'm addressing really Kimberly's comment, I feel like it's been aired, and I don't know that there's anything that we get further with more public hearing. I don't think we do, personally.
And I just want to make sure we're doing everything right, because it's a really important decision.
Right. Well, in my mind, there's no question that we've complied with the hearing requirements.
I'll just say the application before you is the route before you that has been very much vetted.
Okay, thank you. And I made my motion today just out of an abundance of caution. Thank you. One last time. But this meeting was clearly noticed, and there have been many other public hearings about this. I don't have any question in my mind that this is properly noticed and the public has been informed. I think we're sort of, in some respects, this boils. We can, like you said, we can go on discussing this for a decade, literally, and there's always a question about, well, did you consider this? What about this? What about that? And I understand that, but that's not what the law requires us to look at.
Or allows us to.
Just say that Section 506 says that a land use authority shall approve a conditional use if reasonable conditions are proposed or can be imposed to mitigate the reasonably anticipated detrimental effects of the proposed use in accordance with applicable standards. And importantly, it says this requirement to reasonably mitigate does not require elimination of the detrimental effects. And so at some point you have to say, we're never going to eliminate all the detrimental effects. We're not going to figure out every route, every rabbit hole. We're just not going to be able to do it. But that's not what the law requires. In fact, if we were to continue this and keep asking these questions, in my opinion, we're running afoul of the law and our duty. So we don't have to eliminate the detrimental effects. We just have to reasonably mitigate them. And we've done that as the applicant done that. And the circumstances they probably have, but discuss the conditions, I think, that we need to place on them.
Just in as much as we allow statement to interrupt commission discussion, that other route that was talked about would impact the North Fields a lot more than where it's going, which seems to be a great concern of a lot of people. You're now putting that out into a big portion of the North Fields if you took that route. So I think that's a concern that's been looked at, as Jason expressed.
That's exactly the point. If we move it there, then it's other property owners come in and they say, wait a minute, how come you do it, you know?
I disagree with you because it has less impact, Kendall, because it's
The
on the
visual is
side.
what they worry about.
It has less visual. Go look at it.
I know what we're talking about anyway.
So
It's not appropriate for the discussion there.
one of the major issues we need to decide, as in the staff report, is, and this is under conditions, the applicant should keep the heights of the power pole, and I'm reading from page 13. The applicant should keep the heights of the power pole as possible. This may require a higher number of poles, or should we have the fewest number of poles with the heights that may be a little bit higher? That seems to be a fundamental question that we're going to need to answer personally, based on the evidence we've seen. And I remember in particular this diagram that the applicant had, I think at the last meeting where they showed where you could stretch the poles out and make them closer, and it was just, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that having fewer poles is going to mitigate the detrimental effects of this project.
I might suggest, Mr. Chairman, that we chip away at some of these issues and do a straw poll before we make a motion on these. There are 3 or 4 little things that we can add that aren't in the report. One of them is this fewer poles issue. I agree with Commissioner Jewkes. I would support fewer poles rather than more poles, which would require them to be incrementally higher.
All right.
Well, let's just hold it. That's what you think.
I agree.
I agree.
Okay.
So, and these items will have to be in the motion.
Correct.
So we're kind of chipping away. There are a few other conditions that weren't specifically detailed in the staff report. Do you want to keep going?
Yeah, so another example of this is the intersection at Highway 113 and Southfield Road. We spent a lot of time talking about that. There's really 2 issues. One is what's the material of the poles, wood or metal, and then the other one is the setbacks. We want to mitigate the aesthetic effects as much as possible. That's a very busy intersection, it's visible. I think we need to require that they use wooden poles if reasonably possible. They said that there was a chance that they might need to use a tangent steel pole if that's necessary.
Don't they say the one pole had to be metal?
That was,
I think
Just
that's
on one.
yeah,
Just
that's
on
a
one
must,
pole?
that's not a chance. That's-
One metal, one wood is, I think.
I think that's what they're saying to us, but I know you gotta get.
Unless we can straighten them out where we don't need that lateral.
Right, the only way to straighten it out is to move someone's driveway.
We volunteered.
Let's assume that won't happen.
If the bypass goes the way it's supposed to go, I think it angles there.
It does.
Across 113.
It does.
It goes down. So one of those poles has to be metal, I think.
So what I would think we would want to do is say that they need to use wooden poles, and if a tangent steel pole is necessary, they can do that, but in no events are they going to use the larger dead end metal poles as to materials.
Except where required. Because they have to have one at the substation.
I'm only talking about the.
He's only
Just the
113,
crossing.
113 cross.
Just at the crossing.
I agree with that concept, and then I think we go with the 75 feet off existing fence lines, or that's the objective, to be not less than 75 feet.
I agree.
And if you can get it to 100, great.
I will try to spread it out as much as I possibly can.
We let her build a 200-foot pole. We build a 500-foot pole and just have one at each end of the valley.
So they've agreed on the non-specular wire, the wood poles where possible, to vary the distribution lines. Another thing we talked about are the trees at the substation.
minimum.
So 6 feet.
Cool.
6
Well,
feet today when they plant.
It's a maturity question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Species that needs to be.
Right.
A species that will grow to 30 or 40 feet, or whatever is reasonably safe under your requirements. Is that possible, or can we say 30 or 40 feet? I don't know what you require.
I think we submitted a tree plan to staff, and we're more than willing to, you know, live by that tree plan. And all the trees are being spelled out.
They grow to 25 foot.
For this.
That's their maturity, the one that I'm at.
Oh, so you didn't specify anything that's a taller option.
No, that was what was in the plan. That's what those trees are.
Right, so I think we're probably gonna encourage you to, where you can, because I know that the taller they are, they're gonna get a radius of, could they fall into the line?
We'll change
Yeah,
those, we'll change those evergreens to 35 foot rather than 25 foot.
I'll be dead by the time you get how about within the lot? Siting within the lot. I have some questions on that front. Within the lot, they've expressed some flexibility to shift within the 20-acre lot where that might go. I do think it's prudent and part of a bigger picture to accommodate the bypass. But other than that, there's some flexibility north-south, more flexibility. I think it's prudent. I'm a ratepayer. I think it makes sense to say, well, let's try to get as much value out of the house. The farther north we get, the more you impact the value of that house, although I would say
Doesn't
many
matter.
people feel, I don't know.
The value is just a matter of having a 5-acre lot to sell in the house, not necessarily the proximity of the substation to the existing house.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't know. There are some setbacks, aren't there? I don't know what the applicable setbacks are. I know what they are for residential. I know what they are for commercial. I don't know what they are for.
Well, if they do a 5-acre lot and draw a property line there, then from a structure, it should be a 30-foot setback.
I'm talking about with the station within the remaining. Ignore the house for a moment. Within that 20-acre parcel, realistically 15 acres, they have some within the setbacks on the edges. They've got some flexibility on where they can shift that whole thing or flip it, and, right? Do we want to get involved in more than saying, try to center it, try to, you know, create as much a buffer? I don't know what guidance we can
I
give.
guess the only caveat I'd say to that is if you do, then I'd want to just have a call with UDOT and say, you know, do you have any setbacks, clear view setbacks, or
Well, that's the biggest concern, that's why I say the first concern should be the bypass. And providing, are you willing to just deed over to, how's that gonna work? For the bypass, do you just go to, you said they need some land, right?
Yeah, when UDOT goes to build that road, they'll take the land they need and.
You don't need to do it in
They'll
advance.
compensate us for it.
Yeah, but you don't need to do it, but help anything to do it in advance and say,
Oh, no, we'll
let's
do
draw the
it, we'll
line.
do it as fast as we can.
Well, maybe that impacts where your setback is the whole point.
And we'll take that setback to where UDOT says we own it here.
Okay, so maybe the guidance is work with UDOT as an initial matter